Hello, everybody. We are here again at the TalkUP IT show hosted by ControlUp. I'm Yair Bortinger, and today we have a very great topic for you. IT executives and upper management usually have a different take about IT than IT managers. We at ControlUp for years have been focused on providing the best tool for IT admins, helping them to pinpoint the root cause quickly, have a better visibility and control on what's going on right now in their environment, and much, much more. From my limited experience, upper management don't really care about features and capabilities. Today, we have a very special guest, Rob Weiss. Rob, I met almost 3 years ago, and since then we kept in touch and chat about many things. Rob is a technologist who is passionate about user experience. He has worked in the financial sector for over 25 years for companies including Barclays and Blackrock. His latest role have been in the challenge of gathering, displaying, and translating user experience data into actionable insights, and the design and construction of executive-level dashboards to score the consumption of technology services throughout the end-user eyes. Rob is an expert about what questions information upper management are looking to get from their IT department, and today we're going to put on the executive goggles and learn from Rob. What do executives want to know? So, hi, Rob. Thank you for being our guest. And first, before we start talking about the topic, tell us about yourself a bit.
A little about me. Well, first off, I'm a proud dad of 5. I'm a yacht racer. I'm a paddleboarder. I'm a very bad golfer. I enjoy long walks with good company, engaging conversation. I enjoy struggling in my garden, if that's a real thing. And after all that, if I've still got time, I'll sit down and watch a Formula One race. But from a works perspective, that might be more of what you're interested in. The thing that's motivated me the most since the very early days of my career is helping people and believing that I've made a difference. If I can go home at the end of the day and believe I made a difference to something, to someone, to a process, then that gives me a buzz. It always did, and it always has. So the early years of my career were spent as a mobile engineer. I was working for ICL, International Computers Limited, way back in the day. And I was a man in a van driving around with spares. And they gave me really the grounds, the basis of user experience, because I was the guy who was going in there to fix it. If there was a problem, the factory or the whatever was down until I was able to bring it back up. That could be a lot of pressure, but I saw that as a lot of satisfaction. My career went from there to doing telephone support for Microsoft. Again, I'm aging myself here, but I was on the Windows 95 support team when they were releasing that in beta and then in production. Then went and worked on the NT4 support lines. Maybe the highlights were working with the flight sim app. That was great because I needed to have this big computer and all these screens so that I could replicate things when people called in with a problem on their flight sim. And the problems would be something like, every time I try and land at LaGuardia on a wet Wednesday, it crashes. Like, well, maybe that's more to do with your flying. But anyway, no, I had to try and replicate that. So I was never that good as a pilot, however. So anyway, all of those things again gave me that buzz of making a difference. When you put the phone down at the end of a call, hopefully you've resolved it, and if you haven't, you've passed them on to an alternate solution. So it's all about trying to understand your customers, understand what is big in their world, and making sure that IT is a solution for them rather than a problem. Let's not make IT any more complex than it needs to be.
Our topic today is, what do executives really look for from the IT department? Are we only cost? Are we also profit? What are the focus points? And let's start from today, because today's economic storm and situation is challenging across the board. A lot of companies needs to be increasing their efficiency. And from your experience, when executives come to the IT department, what do they focus on? What do they care about? Or or have concern on or from?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I'm going to start off by saying that I think IT execs are in a tough spot right now. Gone are the days when technology knew everything about technology and it was just a mystical black box to anybody else in the business. You might be able to have, way back when, be able to walk into a meeting and kind of blagged it a little bit and sort of said a few things and pacified your audience. That's not the case anymore. That hasn't been for several years now. And basically, what the execs are expected to know is everything. Everything from, hey, what's just gone wrong on my machine, if their boss asks them that, or anything from, what I heard this latest TED talk that was streamed, and I read this on or listened to this thing and consumed this on the way into work on my phone, and what's your opinion on this? To what changes have been made in the last 24 hours, or what outages are impacting us. So the position that execs are in is a really high stress, expected to know everything to every detail off of their cuff as they're walking in and out of their meetings or even just around the office to the water cooler. So what they need is they need their team to support them. That sounds really obvious, but that's why they have the management and the teams that around them. And what they want is accurate data, because data these days drives all decisions.
Right.
And more importantly, or just as importantly, it tracks the progress of those decisions, so we know whether they're good or bad. And if you're going to fail fast. Don't be afraid of failure. Get there, get something moving. If it's not working, know that it's not working, i.e., tracking it, and then don't be afraid to go back and change it. So they need access to data, and data that they can trust. So having single sources rather than multiple sources. If you've got 5 different systems that tell you how many devices you've got and whether they're up or down, which one do you trust? Because I'll bet my bottom dollar they're not all going to say the same number. So have one reliable source, and then make sure that they have the foresight to be able to understand what is going to inform and drive their strategies, but also the insight as to whether or not they're achieving their goals. So I think if you put a lot of that together, and that's even before we start talking about budgetary constraints and the costs. But first off, I think, like I say, if we put all that together, it's about retaining and maintaining an air of authority and confidence, and having, we all trust leaders that inspire and we believe in. If our IT execs are not trusted and believed at the boardroom table, then technology is going to suffer. So that's why we as a team are there to build and support our execs so that they represent us in the best way possible. Your question also asked about the costs and the cost constraints. We can't get away from that in this conversation. You're absolutely right. There are cost constraints. Yeah, again, I'm of that age where I can recall times before the credit crunch and the banking crisis, and those days aren't with us now. So but we have to be aware that the cost goes deeper than just how much you're spending on hardware and whether it's being used. Yes, you still need to know that. But that's now a given. We now need to be more conscious of the knock-on costs for things like changes, for example. You mentioned in your intro, are they bothered about a new function or a new change? And in many levels, I think you're right. No, they're not, because they trust their team to be able to deliver those and make them work. However, they are very worried about costs, and they're very aware that changes equals cost. Right. There's the clear and obvious cost of the development and the resources to be able to make that change. But there's also the costs of testing. That's not only in how much time it takes, but you're taking away time from the business. You need the business to test these things in a test environment. Well, that business person could have been out there making money. It could have been a salesperson. It could have been a trader. It could have been anything.
Right.
We've also got regulation checks. So are these changes still meeting and regulatorily correct? So and of course the need to train people, the user support, and of course the potential impact on infrastructure. Do we need to increase the bandwidth of anything to enable this change? So all of these changes, all of these potential costs add up to a change cost. If that change is not being used, then that's just a pure waste of money. So
Right.
if it's not being used, why is it not being used? Because presumably it's needed, otherwise it wouldn't have been asked for. So, there are elements where we need tool sets to be able to help us understand whether changes are effective and also whether they're wanted, whether we've read the script correctly and whether we've actually answered the question that the business has posed us through that change. You
So,
also
so
meant, sorry,
yeah. So let me ask you something, because I would like, to make it a bit, this is in a high level, very, very interesting. But let's talk about the people that I work with, the customer that I serve. Basically, they're looking at the gritty things. So what is red, what is new, what is customer experience, latency, performance, those kind of things. And you're the expert of user experience. So what are the elements of user experience that they are looking? Because I'm thinking, from our talks as well, they want the employees to have a good performance, a high efficiency. So if the technology stack that we offer our users support that, or does they spend a lot of time, fixing problems or open tickets and all that? So in put it in like a more, let's translate it to IT managers and IT admins. They care about all this, but how can we reflect that to them? So if executives come to us, IT admins, and say, so what do they care? How we can actually reflect better, our hard work and our good achievements.
Yeah, look, I think there's an awful lot in that question. I know we've only got a restricted amount of time, and you and I have known each other for a few years, and we could talk, right? But look, I'll try and keep that short. The first thing is, as IT managers and IT admins, you've got to know your audience. So if you're looking to put data in front of an exec, it sounds real obvious, but you need to get to meet and know that exec. You need to know, we talk a lot about dashboards. When I think of a dashboard, I'm predominantly a car driver, so I think of a car dashboard. But other people are pilots, so they might think of a pilot's dashboard. That's completely different look and feel. The amount of data that different people will desire, it completely changes how you display things and how you communicate with people. Because dashboard is just a way of communicating. You just got to communicate the vitally important pieces. So again, if I map it back to being a car dashboard, I clearly need to know my speed. That's a regulatory thing. If I'm going too fast, I've got a problem. And I also need to know when things go wrong. If my oil pressure is going to disappear because I've got an oil leak, I get a big red light come on, and that tells me that I've got a problem. I need to know whether my passengers are safe. So my little seatbelt icons that appear when somebody's released their seatbelt, then all of these things are important, and it's information that's got to come straight to my mind. If I'm a pilot, I've got a whole host of different things that I need to worry about. So first off, know your audience, know what is key to them, and tune the data that you display to them to be the key pieces. Of course, allow them to drill in, right? Again, going back to that car analogy, we've got the ability to click into a little menu these days and go and read out what our tire pressures are or whatever, but it's not displayed right there front and center, at least not on my car. So keep the data that is key to them in front of them and allow them the ability to drill into the depths when they need it, because they will need it. But I think so definitely understanding your audience, keeping the data succinct, but then be aware of what their potential headaches are. And again, this comes through knowing your audience. So in my opinion, and I might be straying a little bit off topic here, so stop me if I am, but in my opinion, regulation and security, they become two of the biggest headaches, certainly in the financial industry and in other legal industries, insurance industries. Everybody is getting regulated these days. And that's a real tough one to get right. I think from an exec's perspective, if you're too relaxed on your regulations and your security, then quite simply the business can get terminated. So you can't get it wrong on the low side. It's as simple as that. You have to be secure and protecting all of your clients' information. That's what most of those regulations are there for, is to protect their business, it's to protect their funds. So if you get it wrong on the low side, well, you just don't. So therefore you have to look at the opposite end. What if you get it wrong on the overprotective side? It's probably the way you'd err because you want to make sure the business is functioning. But that, if you get it too wrong, too many layers of authentication, too many complex passwords. We all know that we're human, right? We deal with humans on the daily basis. And if you get it wrong on the too high side, then you're impacting user efficiency. So to stay in that fine-tuned zone is really hard. And it's different for each person because these are personal traits. So this is why, as we try and walk this literally a metaphorical minefield of regulation, you've got to be knowing who your customers are. You need to know how they're perceiving things. And the best way to do that is to talk to now your user base. So you need to set up user groups. You need to set up communication groups to understand on a regular basis how the changes are affecting, so that that information can get back to the execs and drive the strategy. So it really is about a teamwork between execs and admins and managers. The worst thing is if you live in fear of your execs, because that's just not a great place to be. You've got to be working as a team. You've got to be trusted, and you've got to trust in them.
Right. We need to find the balance between too secure and not secure, because everything has a cost, and user experience is super important. People come to work and they don't want to deal with other things. They have so much thing on their mind. So as you said in the beginning, you said IT should be simple. IT should solve problem, enable. Another thing that I found very, challenging to report on is user enablement. When you put a new technology or enable a new process, technology usually involved in that. You put a new process, you need to change, even if it's the same tool set that you have, you need to change the configurations and the way the process work. Is this something that executive, ask about? Are they
Absolutely.
asking the IT departments for it, or what's that?
Yeah. Look, absolutely. One of the things that has changed over the last 10 years is the rate of change. The number of things that we've had to do. Yes, of course, there have been all sorts of triggers. We know, COVID and remote working, shifting to cloud. All of these things have been trends over the last few years, and the rate of change has been astronomical. These people are just there to do their job, and yet the rate of change in technology, the last thing we want to do is have that be a problem. We want technology to be an enabler, not a hindrance. So yes, the execs are very aware, and indeed, there are now great teams popping up in various places that are intended to be the eyes and ears of the business, so that we do have regular interactions with business heads and with groups of like-minded individuals, so that whether this is sort of trading groups or whether this is sort of admin groups, but any of these user groups that come together, they need to have an interface in with technology so that we can find out verbally, but the verbal is in absence of data. So to your question, yes, as soon as we can get data points that are key around usage, and we can measure usage in many different ways, and we have to be smart around this. Again, this is a really long conversation. I can go on about this for a long time,
No,
but
that's
quite
okay.
simply, things like how long does it take to open? How long do people spend on each page? Some of this data we can learn from our colleagues in our web analysis, and they've been doing some of this data for a long time, but we now need to look at that within apps. Again, your conversation with Davina was talking about Office 365, and as everything starts to shift more cloud-based, then some of this data becomes available when it wasn't available in some of the old on-prem apps. So we should be getting better at looking at smarter data, so that we can see how long are people sort of sitting there staring at a screen, scratching their heads, thinking, hang on, which option do I choose here? Why have I got 87 different menu items? Where's the simple logical flow that takes me through these things? So compare that with an app that is very intrinsically obvious as to where you need to go. There's presumably less head scratching, and it's more logical flow, logical load, logical flow. Of course, running alongside all of that, because we've talked very much about humans and user feedback, we can't ignore the growth of AI, automation, ChatGPT,
Oh,
All of
that's
these
an
things are there. Again, another great long conversation. I know we've spoken about this in the past, and I'm sure we will
yeah.
again in the future. But all of these things are about simplifying the processes and automating them and turning them into swift processes. And I think that is going to have a big future.
Actually, that's a good segue to my next question, because I know for a fact you were processing huge amount of data. And the problem is not collecting the data, is making sense out of it. And that's what I want to do with you. Maybe we'll take off the executive goggles out and just speculate about what is the future of IT as a whole, because everybody wants everything simpler, less choices. If you go to an ice cream parlor and they have 25 flavors, usually you choose the three that you know. You don't want to spend 7 minutes about choosing, well, should I take this, should I take that? The same with options and features where users need exactly what you said, scratch, what do I do now? So let's speculate a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, we've been talking about AI, you and I, for several years, because we saw the opportunity that artificial intelligence can do pretty much anything so long as it's got the data and it's been given a steer at the beginning. Clearly, ControlUp had a huge amount of data, have a huge amount of data, and each of your customers has got their own silos of that data. And we, as customers, therefore look to do whatever we can to be smart around what is all of this data telling us, right? You've got every process that's running, you've got every error that's been going on, you've got everything that's been going on in my entire world, and
Exactly.
and if I can steer an AI bot to the right areas, there are gems in there. Then, of course, if we can find some way, and again, regulation will always have its limitations here, right? And doing the right thing for your customers is key in all of our minds. But if we can find the right way of looking at that at a grander scale across the universe of clients, we can see trends and identify errors before they would even impact us. Somehow there has to be a future there. I think in the troubleshooting space, data has got a lot more of a role to play than it does today. I think if we look outside of the troubleshooting space, you've already mentioned it about we've got to remove complexity. And I love your analogy about the ice creams. And having just come back from Italy, they do the best ice creams, I swear. But you're absolutely right. I must have gone to 4 or 5 different gelato outlets, and I think pretty much every time I had the same one. But I was able to compare and contrast between them very well. But they all had tubs and tubs and tubs of options and choices. But I knew what I wanted. My girlfriend that was with me, she knew what she wanted, and it was very different to mine. The next person in the queue, they would have had a different one to mine too. That's the challenge from the vendor's perspective, from the IT perspective, delivering the service out to the customer is the customer only wants the same thing time and time again, maybe with a few variations if something's different. But typically, they know what they want and they want the same. But that's not the
Right.
same as everybody else. So there's the next challenge is how do I keep things simple while appealing to such a broad audience? So the only way to do that, in my humble opinion, is to know what what the desires are and know your customer. I'm going to sound a bit like a stuck record here, but you've got to know who it is you're dealing with, because that's how you deliver the personalized service that they're going to need. And they don't want to make a choice of 87 different things. I spent my early years also managing the help desk and being involved in setting up help desk systems. And the amount of time that it took to log a ticket, because we had to scroll through, I don't know, I think there's 600-700 apps to find the app that we wanted. And okay, you could type it, but if you weren't quite sure, you had to kind of scroll down and pick it, and then the name jumped out at you. But it was always the same 10, 15, 20 items. When you looked at the data at the end of the month, the top 10 was pretty much the top 10, and it was pretty much always the same things. No matter how many options you had in your drop down menu, it was the same stuff that boiled to the top. And therefore, we naturally ask the question, is that because those same 10 things are going wrong, or is that human behavior in picking this thing because it's the popular item and it's close enough to what it was. So and there were a lot of analysis of the data that we delved into to try and find out what was going on there, and it all boils down to you've got to make it simple for people to do what they want to do, otherwise they'll take the path of least resistance.
No, I know it remind me. I was working in CSAID. It's a ticketing system. Okay, so I was designing, helping customers design their own help desk. And we noticed that if you have like a category that is like a cascading, you have major category, secondary level category, third level category. And there are some categories that you need only to mark one category because there is no other, no second or third. And we found out that most of the help desk admins basically chose quickly that one because it just allowed them to finish quickly. And another thing, when you have the free text, we said it's mandatory, so everybody just put one dot.
Yeah.
So as you said, we need to make it a bit easier. And I think even in the help desk space, I think AI can take a look at the email body, so to speak, at the raw where the meat is, the language of the conversation, and they can auto categorize it, auto prioritize it, even auto route the ticket to the right person that can solve it, or even offer the answer itself. And some of it is already there. So I'm thinking, putting in the context of ControlUp, you mentioned we have all the data, we have the processes data, the sessions data, everything, and AI bringing recommendations. That would be awesome. AI when configure the stress levels according to your environment and adjust it automatically according to different days or different times of the day. The limits are endless. You just need to open up your imagination.
Completely agree. And you mentioned earlier about AI and ChatGPT. And yes, they've been headlines for 6 months, whatever. And it's always been almost as a fear. And we can't be in fear of a technology, right? It's been invented. You can't uninvent it. We can't just put it back in its box and pretend it never came out. So therefore, we've got to embrace it. And when we embrace it, yes, of course, there'll be more challenges for regulations and security folks, etc. And it has a whole load of risks around it. But your story there about writing the help desk system reminded me of a conversation I had with my son. He was in university, and one of his tasks was to write a help desk system. So he wrote a very simple help desk system, and this must have been 4 years ago, 5 years ago, maybe. And now a lot of what he wrote then, you could just get ChatGPT to do it. Probably with about an hour and a half of work, you could probably write a help desk system that had huge capabilities. And I'm sure somebody's out there doing that right now, because the possibilities in this technology has evolved so much that it's really hard to see where the future is going to be. And what technology is going to come along and transform things. But I think we all agreed when we started talking about AI many years ago that that had to be part of the future. And I think now what we're seeing in the form of ChatGPT is that way of interacting with it, that real language. Just ask it a plain, simple question, and it can come back with a really well-informed answer. Yes, of course, we need to be careful that if it's just going out to the internet and pulling data, there's a lot of unscrupulous data and unfounded data out there. So yes, that's the next challenge, I think, is around data clarity. Again, your story about help desk admins and engineers going into a system and picking the path of least resistance, putting a dot in there. I think that having data integrity and data that you can trust has been a theme for a number of years, and it will remain a theme. And I think it will possibly become even more important because of the likes of ChatGPT, because of we now have the propensity to deal with some of that data and to be able to glean useful insight out of that data. If the only insight that's going to come back is dot, then you've lost the value of it, right? So, but back in the day, when we didn't do a great deal of analysis on the data. We didn't get any value out of it. So if there was no value coming from the data, what's the point in putting value into the data? I think that was the mental approach. Now I believe certainly different generations, they see, and the value of good quality data is clear. And I believe that will drive the human behaviors along with better application design, and also understanding where we need to ask the tough questions and where we don't. Again, it comes back to that core principle of it should be simple. Let's not make it a hindrance. Don't ask somebody to categorize things to 3 levels if you don't need it. And let's get AI to do the categorization after we've understood what the problem is, rather than before, when you've got a lot more time and you can run a system on it. So that was another great piece of work and an interesting exercise that we did with some great colleagues in India, where we designed a system to go look at all of our call closures and see if there was a better category that could be assigned to them. And the answer was yes.
Wow. Yes.
I think it was about 70-80% of our tickets we could categorize better.
Wow.
But we also identified that probably only 10 or 15% of them were categorized incorrectly, right? So there's a difference between being accurate and being correct. So yes, something's an Outlook problem, yes, but is it an Outlook problem with an add-in that's the cause rather than an Outlook problem and the user is the cause, right? So so we had different ways of analyzing this data, but I've worked with so many great people over so many years looking at data that there's always stories in that area. But definitely data integrity and knowing when the right time to ask the difficult questions. I think that's going to be key.
It is. Data is challenging because now it's cheap to collect it, and I think in many ways AI can digest huge amount of data very quickly and give some insights in a good way. And I did experiment with this with AI a bit, digesting some data and giving some insights. And I think the future is let's say is bright in that aspect, but there are always fear, and then there are a lot of talk about that.
I think that AI and all of those platforms that are allowing us to deal and manipulate that data, yes, there has got to be controls around it. We've got to be careful. But so we have with all of technology. You can look back over the years. Cloud, it's a great example, right? There was a huge fear of what I'm going to chuck all of my secure passwords, all of my pictures of my kids, all of the things that I hold so dear, all of my salary details, whatever it's going to be thrown onto the cloud and anybody can see it. It's like, of course, that's a fear. And we're right to have those concerns because that's what makes sure that regulation puts controls around it. But we can't stop it. We can't sort of say, oh, you know what? No, let's put that back in the box and lock it away and bury it somewhere and pretend it never happened. And indeed, you can draw parallels with nuclear power and splitting the atoms. I mean, all of these things had fears back in the day, but look how society and the world has taken that, both for good and for bad. It's making progress, and progress is what we're all about. So, I don't believe that technology is inherently bad. It's about you've got to use technology for the right and the good, and you've got to put controls around things, and you need to have visibility as to what's been done.
Absolutely, it's how you apply the technology. Technology can be good and bad. It's just who use it and how.
Without it, we're all going to be overstaffed, we're all going to be understaffed and overworked. And all of these technologies have to play out in the future to help us.
Absolutely. So first of all, thank you. Thank you for today. It's been a very insightful conversation. And I will talk to you again very, very soon.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for inviting me. And I hope your audience enjoyed the conversation and you get some great feedback, because feedback is everything. And good luck with your futures.